This is not only the first smartphone on the planet to use 5-axis optical image stabilization, but OPPO's first device to include their very first cutting-edge image neural processing unit known as MariSilicon X, built on 6nm process node technology, which is the first of its kind in the world. This new image processing chipset is dedicated to powering the OPPO Find X5 Pro's triple rear camera setup, which includes two 50-megapixel Sony IMX766 sensors for its main and ultra-wide cameras, as well as its 13-megapixel telephoto lens. And thanks to OPPO's latest partnership, Hasselblad has helped develop this new camera experience. The Find X5 Pro also has a new multi-tier cooling system, new Snapdragon 8 Gen 1 CPU, improved refresh rate technology thanks to its LTPO 2.0 WQHD Plus AMOLED display, new battery health engine to aid in battery longevity and faster charging, increased 80-watt Super VOOC wired charging, 50-watt wireless charging, larger 5000 mAh battery, has a new ceramic backplate, and still supports IP68 water and dust resistance. This is TechNick, and this is my extremely detailed full review of the OPPO Find X5 Pro. The OPPO Find X5 Pro comes in two main color variants, that being glazed black, or the version that I have with me here today, being ceramic white. The ceramic white version looks absolutely phenomenal, and in order to achieve the curves on the back, they have had to do a 75-degree precision craft and have had to execute over 2,000 plus control points in order to get this elegant and clean, breathtaking look. Inside the phone, we are kitted with a large 5000 mAh dual cell battery, 80-watt wide charging, 50-watt wireless charging, new Snapdragon 8 Gen 1 chipset, super large vapor chamber, which also has 3D graphene film, LPDDR5 RAM, and UFS 3.1 storage. The display is protected by Gorilla Glass Victus. There is an aluminum frame wrapping around the device, and at the back we have that wonderful nanometer microcrystalline ceramic back, which is supposedly twice as hard as glass. And yes, the Find X5 Pro still retains its IP68 resistance rating. Curving into that camera module sits three very capable sensors. We have a 50-megapixel IMX766 ultra-wide and the same sensor as its main sensor, as well as a 13-megapixel telephoto lens. The main sensor actually has 5-axis optical image stabilization, which is the first of its kind, and that little white dot that you can see underneath the telephoto lens is a 13-channel spectral sensor. The camera setup is largely similar to last year's, but this time around we have that new 6nm MariSilicon X imaging NPU, which boasts in 20-bit HDR recording as well as 4K night video capturing. The 50-megapixel ultra-wide shot looks fantastic, binning down to 12.5 looks even better thanks to AI. We have that 50-megapixel main shot as well. Geez, that MariSilicon X chip really does wonders with these camera sensors. We of course also have 2x optical zoom over here, 5x digital zoom, still using the telephoto lens, goes up to 10x, and the max is 20x digital zoom, which doesn't look terrible if you ask me. We also have the main camera taking a photo of me over here, and we can switch over to portrait mode at 1x or use the telephoto mode, which looks phenomenal. We also have macro mode over here, which utilizes the ultra wide sensor, which is nice to get close up and personal to a subject. And we have new Hasselblad master filters, which look absolutely incredible across the three that are being used right here. Of course, we also have a JPEG imaging as well as RAW imaging, and now we have RAW Plus, much like we saw on the OnePlus 10 Pro. We also have 23 megapixel 65 by 24 aspect ratio X-Pan mode, which looks pretty great too. And we do have close to 4K film mode over here, where you can use log for greater dynamic range and freedom in post-processing. We also have 20-bit HDR recording, which you can use in film mode too. And of course, we can also record using film mode with the regular film mode settings, which is original. No need for post-processing over here, since it looks pretty much like any film or movie should. We also have 4K 60 FPS, which is nice and stable, buttery smooth, and super clear and clean. And of course, we do have 4K 30 FPS using the main camera and 30 FPS because we're using AI highlight video over here, which kind of enriches the colors and pops in detail too. We do have 1080p at 30 FPS bokeh video recording, which does a superb job, but I would have liked to see 4K bokeh video recording over here since the Snapdragon 8 Gen 1 chipset is capable of it. Ultra steady mode off over here, 1080p 60 FPS, turning it on, zooms in a bit using the main sensor, and turning Ultra Steady Pro on uses the ultra wide sensor, but once again crops in a bit too to get more stabilized frames over here. But do bear in mind that OPPO have actually told me that this is still pre-release software and their next update is said to improve all things in the camera department, including stabilization. But if you ask me, stabilization, especially with the ultra wide cam over here, looks absolutely fantastic. And yes, you can record 4K 60 and 4K 30 with the ultra wide lens. 4K 60 at night using the ultra wide is packed with detail, but of course has a bit of a glazy effect over here since we're recording at 60 FPS. Using that AI highlight video at night, this is the 4K night video recording we spoke of earlier. It looks absolutely fantastic, and comparing it side by side over here with it off on the left and on the right, it's literally night and day. Same thing can be said and can be used with the main camera lens over here with night mode video off on the left and AI highlight video on the right hand side. Once again, like night and day. 4K 60 FPS using the main camera at night. Once again, packed with detail, but still has a bit of a glazed effect over here. 4K 30 at night using AI highlight video is fantastic. Still a bit of a buzzy effect, but it's a lot cleaner and it tends to control light a lot better. But what can you say? It's the first 4K night videography we've ever seen. Taking ultra wide snaps at night with night mode off and on look fantastic. With the main off and on look fantastic, though you can't really tell much of a difference with night mode on since the camera lenses actually do such a great job taking photos at night. 2x digital zoom over here, not optical, since even at 5x we don't see the telephoto camera being used at night with night mode off or on. Same thing can be said with 10x with night mode off or on, though it still looks okay, I guess. The telephoto lens only strangely enough kicks in at 20x zoom, which is the max zoom. Nevertheless, the camera setup is absolutely phenomenal if you ask me, especially thanks to that wonderful MariSilicon X NPU, which does a great job. We have a power button on the right hand side as well as a split volume rocker on the left hand side. At the bottom we have a dual SIM 5G standby tray. Unfortunately, no expandable storage over here, though there is that water resistant seal thanks to IP68 rating. We have USB 3.1 Type-C port at the bottom, as well as the first dual speaker at the bottom and one at the top found inside the earpiece, which utilizes Dolby Atmos. We have a 32 megapixel Sony IMX709 selfie camera over here, which uses red, green, blue, and white pixels. And we have a new 90-degree field of view mode over here, which we can use in portrait mode too, which looks fantastic. And cropping into the 80-degree field of view mode looks even better if you ask me.
What's up guys, this is TechNick recording a 1080p at 30 FPS selfie video on the brand new OPPO Find X5 Pro. Yes, unfortunately its max resolution when recording with the selfie cam is 1080p and its max frame rate when using the selfie cam is 30 FPS, but we do have an AI highlight video mode for the selfie cam, which we're going to jump into right now. And this is the exact same walk that I just did, but this time with AI enabled. Still 1080p, still 30 FPS, but with AI. Let me know what you guys think of the audio and video quality when recording using the selfie cam.
It's unfortunate that there is no 4K selfie video recording, though we can do bokeh portrait mode at 80 degrees field of view, 1080p at 30 FPS, and edge detection is near perfect. Same thing can be said when using the 90-degree field of view, or as you could say, I guess pretty much ultra wide bokeh portrait over here using the selfie cam. Looks pretty phenomenal, really highlights the subject and blurs the background. Of course, we can also record 1080p 30 FPS using that 90-degree field of view in a regular situation. It does a more than decent job with average stabilization over here, and taking video at night with AI highlight video on the right hand side. Once again, a huge difference over here. I try to keep still so that you can actually see how much better it handles light. Of course, we can also record using the bokeh portrait at night, and it does an okay job, I guess you could say. Taking a portrait mode shot at night looks okay, but a regular shot with night mode off and night mode on is pretty impeccable if you ask me. You can do the same with 90-degree field of view over here, though portrait mode doesn't look the best. When you take portrait mode off and put night mode on, it's darn near perfect. That selfie snap is pretty incredible if you ask me. Might not be the best around, but it's definitely up there with the best of the best. And powering on the device, getting to our wonderful Find X5 Pro's under display fingerprint sensor over here, which is indeed optical. We do have an always on display, and it utilizes the LTPO display, which means that it can refresh at 1 FPS when your device is off. We of course can create our own always on display, whether it be in the kaleidoscope or it be portrait silhouette or the new emoji over here, which is widely customizable and looks awesome on your always on display. And we do have 2D face unlock, though do bear in mind it utilizes the selfie camera. The display itself is 6.7 inches. It is of course AMOLED. It is LTPO 2.0. It is curved. It has a WQHD plus resolution. 1 billion colors, supports HDR10 plus content, has 1300 nits of peak brightness, 120 Hz refresh rate, and a crazy 1000 Hz touch sampling rate. We have a screen to body ratio over here of 92.7%. which makes things pretty symmetrical, top to bottom, left to right. And of course, we have that wonderful WQHD plus display with 526 ppi. The display itself can refresh between 1 to 120 Hz thanks to the new low temperature polycrystalline oxide display, which can get as low as 1 frames per second all the way up to as high as 120. Of course, we can adjust the brightness too, and we can change a bunch of different color mode settings, including Pro mode. Within settings, we have a nature tone display as well as eye comfort, image sharpener, video color enhancer, and we also have bright HDR video mode to make your videos truly pop. And of course, we have dark mode as well, and we can switch between gentle, medium, and enhanced mode for a nice deep and dark black. And yes, it does affect your home screen as well as third-party apps, and first-party apps look nice, black, and rich too. Flicking back to the widescreen and getting into our software, which is of course ColorOS 12.1 skinned over Android 12. Now, I have been told by OPPO, like I mentioned in the camera department, that this is pre-release software, but yes, Google is fully tuned in, and there are a bunch of different features that you can do within the phone, such as pin a floating window to the right of the screen, as well as flick between different multitasking actions, such as split screen over here, floating window, mini window, so on and so forth. And we do have personalizations again this time around, where you can customize pretty much anything that your heart desires, including icons, with a ridiculous amount of customizations. When it comes to icons, you can change the quick settings shapes, you can change your colors of your entire user interface. Be sure to check out my full ColorOS 12 review, which I posted a few months back. We do also have Haptics over here, where you can change your haptics between crisp and gentle, and it feels absolutely incredible no matter which one you take. And of course, we have the dual speakers over here, which utilize Dolby Atmos. So let's go ahead and give them a listen while playing some music. And now it's time to go ahead and give those speakers a listen while gaming. We do have a game assistant overlay over here, which utilizes game mode for overclocking in games, as well as AI frame stabilization. And yes, there is an inbuilt stats meter where you can view your FPS, GPU, and CPU at the top of the display. Playing our first graphics intense game here, that being Genshin Impact, we managed to get a frame rate between 36 and 57, which doesn't sound the best, but do bear in mind this is a very, very demanding game, and the average Snapdragon 8 Gen 1 powered smartphone on my channel gets between 34 and 58. Testing out Bullet Force over here, which has no frames per second cap, whereas Genshin Impact had a 60 FPS frames per second cap. This should be able to hit up to 120, but it's capping at 60, most likely a software issue. Hopefully this gets solved with a future software update. Same thing can be said with Real Racing 3 over here, which also has an unlimited frame cap, but is capping at 60 FPS. Once again, something I hope gets fixed with a future software update. We do have 12 gigs of LPDDR5 RAM over here that can go all the way up to 19 gigs of RAM thanks to RAM expansion, but do bear in mind this utilizes UFS 3.1 storage. And of course we have the inclusion of the new 4nm run Snapdragon 8 Gen 1 chipset, which apparently has 20% more performance and is 30% more power efficient. But what does that mean in terms of benchmarks? Well, we're going to go ahead and enable OPPO's high performance mode over here before we jump into that. And now we're going to test out the percentage of battery at the start as well as its temperature in degrees Celsius, which we'll compare at the end. Kickstarting things off here with AnTuTu version 9.3.1 to test out GPU and CPU, moving on to Geekbench version 5.4.4 to stress test the CPU, and ending off with 3D Mark Wildlife just to test out the GPU performance. And getting to the final battery percentage, the OPPO Find X5 Pro drained by 10% with a 33.33 mAh per minute drain. And in terms of temperature, it only added 17.6 degrees in Celsius. It scored 1,002,510 points in AnTuTu, which is roughly similar to other Snapdragon 8 Gen 1 phones I've tested on my channel, and is a hell of a lot better than its predecessor Find X3 Pro. It got a single core score of 1226 in Geekbench and a multi-core score of 3386. The single core score is pretty good, pretty similar to other Snapdragon 8 Gen 1 phones, but its multi-core score is pretty low down, almost matching that of its predecessor. And when it comes to 3D Mark Wildlife, it got a whopping score of 9,791 points with a crazy high average frames per second of 58.6, which not only puts it well above the OPPO Find X3 Pro of last year, but even outperforming the average score of other Snapdragon 8 Gen 1 phones. The OPPO Find X5 Pro has one of the cleanest designs I have ever come across, thanks to its nanometer microcrystalline ceramic backplate that has been carved to perfection and curved into a work of art. Those subtle curves wrap into its more than impressive rear camera setup that takes some of the best photos and videos I have ever seen, thanks to its 5-axis image stabilized 50 megapixel IMX766 main sensor, which is the same great sensor used for its ultra wide camera, and completing the trio is a decent 13 megapixel telephoto lens. Image processing is now better than ever due to its new color spectral sensor and first of its kind 6nm run MariSilicon X imaging NPU. The optical under display fingerprint sensor gets you into the device super quick, and once in, you are treated to ColorOS 12.1 skinned over Android 12 that makes for a clean user experience filled with more than useful features and tons of customizations. We get loads of LPDDR5 RAM on board, and OPPO's latest flagship is powered by the new 4nm run Snapdragon 8 Gen 1 chipset, which aids in the pixel popping WQHD Plus panel that utilizes LTPO 2.0 technology, which allows the display to refresh between 1 and 120 Hz. Gaming on the Find X5 Pro is a bit of a mixed bag, however, since it caps most high refresh rate games at 60 FPS, and despite having AI frame stabilization, varies quite a lot in FPS while playing demanding games. The display is identical to its predecessor, which is not really a bad thing since it packs in a WQHD Plus resolution, 1 billion colors, and a whopping 1300 nits of brightness. Wireless charging wattage has remained the same at 50 watts, but wide charging has increased to 80 watts, and its battery capacity has jumped up to 5000 milliamps, which makes use of the new battery health engine for a healthier battery over time and faster, cooler charging, which makes it easy to recommend the OPPO Find X5 Pro. Not only because it has improved on almost all things that made its predecessor great, but because it's OPPO's best flagship smartphone to date.